Hey, welcome back to Bobb-z Callahan's Word of Advice. And for this Word of Advice video, I wanted to talk about a more serious topic, and well, this is on the importance of our mental attitude. And I wanted to focus on this because, all of us have a mental attitude, whether it's positive or somewhat positive or negative. And after my experience so far in life, and after reading about different kinds of attitudes, I wanted to talk about what I would believe is a good mental attitude, and also just how far our attitudes can take us in life, whether it's good or bad. I want to start off by talking about the negative mental attitude, and I can say that I have had more experience in thinking this way, even though I no longer really think much in that way. And I can say that I can totally relate to those of you who are dealing with a negative mental attitude. Well, for those of you out there with a negative mental attitude, or for those of you who want to hear about it, someone with a negative mental attitude tends to think more on the downside and not really much on the bright side at all. One example I can think of when it comes to thinking negatively is, let's say for example it's a nice summer day. Maybe it's a little bit hot, but the sun is out and shining and it's just looking beautiful out. Well, someone with a negative mental attitude might say, sure, it's a nice sunny day, but oh, it's just so hot, or oh, the weather is just not as I believe it should be, or they may not even be thinking of the simple things in life, like, oh, I'm so glad that, I've got something to drink which can keep me hydrated. I'm so happy that I got a shelter to go inside to if it's really warm, or maybe even an air conditioner to help you cool off. Someone with a negative mental attitude might tend to think that way about certain circumstances and also about themselves. And I can say that I used to think this way for a number of years. And as a result, I would have to say that when I thought negatively, I was really more depressed and unhappy because I was not thinking about the positive side as much. Even though there were plenty of positive things which happened in my life for all the years I thought more negatively, I was still unhappy a lot because I allowed my negative mental attitude to really take over in my mind. And I know that there were plenty of people who told me to think positive. Don't be looking on the negative side all the time. But since I was so used to thinking negatively, I was still in that habit of thinking negatively for years and years. And what I can say is that it just didn't help me at all. I talked myself out of opportunities. I had a much lower self-esteem. And when it came to interacting with other people, sometimes I could bring the mood down, and that's really not fun when anybody brings the mood down, whether they are intentionally doing that or whether they are unintentionally doing that. But those can be some of the results of having a negative mental attitude. Now, as for a positive mental attitude, somebody with a positive mental attitude will try to look on the bright side, whether things are going really well or not. Let's say, for example, that somebody wakes up one day and they have a sore throat. And a sore throat is obviously not fun. But someone with a positive mental attitude is likely to say, well, I've got a sore throat, but on the positive side, it's not like I've broken a bone, or it's not like I have a fever right now. Things could be much, much worse. In the last few years of my life, I can say that I have thought more positively, and really it was one of my father's best friends who encouraged me to think positively, because he noticed that I was not thinking that way at all. And ever since I gave the positive mental attitude a chance, I can say that I am much happier thinking this way. And today, I'm able to encourage myself to try out some new opportunities. I can encourage other people more, since I'm more willing to encourage people to do good things. And overall, I have a higher self-esteem and I have much more confidence. But this has been a result of having a positive mental attitude. And between those two mental attitudes, I would highly encourage anybody out there to try to lean more on the positive side. Now, I know for those of you out there who have thought negatively for a while, that may not be so easy. But I would say if you are just tired of thinking negatively and you're really trying to get out of the slump, which can be the result of thinking negatively, I would try to hang around people who have a more positive attitude and let that positive attitude sink in, and also just try to train yourself to start thinking that way. For me, I know after my father's friend encouraged me to think positively, it was not an overnight thing where I started to look on the positive side most of the time. You know, it had taken months and months until I started to really think positively most of the time, and that positive mental attitude set in. And I believe anybody is capable of being able to switch from a negative mental attitude to a positive attitude. Now, I also believe it's capable by chance that some people can slip into thinking, well, from a positive mental attitude to a negative attitude. In life, there are going to be certain circumstances and sometimes even people who may try to drag us down. And what's very important about our attitudes is that, you know, if we, especially when it comes to a negative attitude, if we let a negative attitude dominate in our minds, then it can really make us think more negatively. And of course, if we allow a positive mental attitude to dominate in our mind, then that can also make us think more positively all the time. But we have to be careful when it comes to dealing with circumstances and dealing with certain people in life. Because, you know, there are going to be times when we can think positively much more easily, and there are going to be times when we will think negatively much more easily. I'm sure you've heard the expression that life is like a roller coaster, and I would totally agree with that. There are going to be good days and bad days, good events and bad events in everybody's life. And the way we respond to whatever is going on in our lives is very important. And I believe that, you know, a negative mental attitude will make us feel more sad, and we won't have as much self-esteem or confidence, especially when it comes to dealing with other events and also how we perceive ourselves. But if we try to develop a positive mental attitude and we try to look on the bright side, then not only can we feel happy, but we can also motivate and encourage others to feel happy as well. I'd like to close this video by sharing an example of what happened when I thought positively about something, even though the negative thoughts were trying to creep in for a little bit. I remember early in 2012, I noticed on a website, it was a church website, that they were offering a youth ministry internship. And I was thinking to myself at first, hey, this could be for me because I have really thought about becoming a youth minister one day. And On the positive side, this could give me a chance to step out of my comfort zone, meet new people, and I could really grow from the experience. But then when it came to the negative thoughts, some negative thoughts which tried to creep in were, oh, Bobb-z, you may not be good enough for this job, and you may embarrass yourself if you take on this experience. Why don't you let somebody else more qualified take on this internship? Those were the negative thoughts creeping in. Just a little bit, but thankfully since in early 2012, the positive mental attitude dominated more in my mind. I managed to take a chance and apply for this youth ministry internship, and I got the job, and I can say that it was one of the best decisions that I have ever made in my life. But that was a result, even taking on that internship, that was a result of thinking more positively. And I did not allow those negative thoughts to creep into my head like they could have if I was 4 years younger. If I had been 4 years younger, or if I had still allowed that negative mental attitude to stay in my mind, the odds are higher that I would have talked myself out of taking on an internship where I met a lot of nice people, I grew as a person, I went on 2 mission trips, and I had one of the best summers of my life. If I allowed the negative mental attitude to stay in my mind when I discovered that youth ministry internship opportunity, then odds are I probably would have talked myself out of experiencing a wonderful summer working in a church. But thankfully, I thought more positively, and I took on something which was out of my comfort zone, but it was very rewarding. And you see, if you think positive in any case, whether it comes to taking on a new opportunity, or just thinking about the simple blessings in your everyday life, then it is likely that you will be able to take on many new experiences which will help you grow, and you can encourage other people in a good way, and overall, you will be much happier. So in the end, be careful of how you think, and just when it comes to your attitude overall. I know some days it'll be easier to think negative, and some days it'll be easier to think positive. If you ask me which way to go, I would definitely try to think positively and allow that mental attitude to take over in your mind. And I would say if you do that, then you could become like me, and by me I mean I try to think positively and I try to encourage others, and overall I'm just much happier. So with that, I certainly hope what I've had to talk about, and after all this rambling, I certainly hope what I've had to talk about in this video will come in handy. I certainly hope and wish you the best when it comes to your mental attitude. And be sure to come back for another word of advice video.